How does a woman vanish from a sealed elevator car suspended between floors, with the ceiling hatch bolted shut, dust patterns undisturbed, and her briefcase still sitting beside a tablet glowing with evidence that could have destroyed a $12 million sale? At 11:47 p.m. on February 9, 2019, security camera 2B captured Patricia Kellerman stepping into elevator car B at Millfield Manufacturing in Connecticut. She carried 15 years of experience exposing industrial safety fraud and preliminary findings documenting systematic bypassing of safety interlocks. At 11:52:37 p.m., the dispatch system registered position unknown. The car had stopped precisely 22.7 feet above the third-floor landing. When firefighters lowered it 49 minutes later, they found her leather briefcase undisturbed, her tablet still displaying measurement data. But Patricia Kellerman was gone. The elevator measured 12 feet by 8 feet, no hidden compartments, no secondary exits, steel mesh gates intact on 3 sides. Independent Inspector Thomas Riley would later conclude that the elevator's safety systems had been deliberately modified. Someone had turned the elevator into a trap. 6 weeks later, the factory closed. Car B was dismantled and sold for scrap, and a traffic camera captured someone driving Kellerman's rental car away at 2:17 a.m., more than 2 hours after she vanished from a box suspended in darkness. On the night of February 9, 2019, Patricia Kellerman's silver Accord pulled into the employee parking lot of Millfield Manufacturing at exactly 11:23 p.m. The insurance investigator from Unified Risk Management had driven 3 hours from her Hartford office, following up on what her supervisor called disturbing patterns in the company's workers' compensation claims. The factory sat in the heart of Connecticut's River Valley, a sprawling brick complex that had produced precision machinery parts since 1897. Steam rose from vents along the roofline, mixing with the February fog that rolled off the Connecticut River just 2 miles east. Night shift workers moved between buildings under the harsh glare of sodium lights, their breath visible in the 30-degree air. Frank Kowalski, the night supervisor, met Kellerman at the main entrance. A 30-year veteran of Millfield Manufacturing, Kowalski wore the wary expression of a man who'd dealt with corporate inspectors before. According to his later statement to investigators, he wasn't pleased about the unscheduled visit. She showed her credentials and explained she needed to inspect our safety systems, Kowalski told Hartford County Sheriff's deputies. Said there were concerns about our elevator maintenance and worker safety protocols. I had to give her access. That was company policy when it came to insurance matters. Kellerman carried a tablet computer and a leather briefcase containing measuring devices, a digital camera, and thick folders of documentation. At 42 years old, she had spent 15 years investigating industrial safety violations for Unified Risk Management. Her colleagues described her as methodical, thorough, and unafraid to challenge corporate explanations when the evidence didn't match. The factory's interior revealed a century of industrial evolution. Original brick walls rose 30 feet to cast iron ceiling supports, while modern machinery hummed beneath fluorescent lights installed in the 1980s. Most striking was the elevator system, 4 massive freight cars that moved materials between the facility's 6 floors. The elevators were original to the building, though they'd been retrofitted multiple times over the decades. Workers on the night shift expressed immediate concern when they learned about Kellerman's focus on the elevator system. According to statements collected by investigators, at least 3 employees had reported recent mechanical problems to management. Car B, in particular, had experienced what workers described as jerky stops and strange hydraulic noises during the previous month. Maintenance worker Jose Ramirez later told investigators that he'd submitted formal repair requests for all 4 elevator cars in January. The hydraulic pressure wasn't consistent, Ramirez explained. Sometimes the cars would drop a few inches when you got on. Sometimes they'd overshoot floors by 6 or 8 inches. I told Frank we needed professional service, but management said it wasn't in the budget until next quarter. Kellerman began her inspection on the ground floor, photographing safety equipment and testing emergency communication systems. Her tablet recorded measurements of load capacities, brake systems, and hydraulic pressure readings. She spoke briefly with several workers, taking notes about their experiences with the elevator system. By 11:40 p.m., she had completed her first floor assessment and was ready to move to the upper levels. The factory's production floors were stacked vertically, with raw materials entering on the ground floor and finished products shipping from the 6th floor. To conduct a complete safety audit, Kellerman would need to ride the freight elevators to every level. Frank Kowalski escorted her to elevator car B, the largest of the 4 freight units. The car measured 12 feet by 8 feet, with steel mesh gates and controls that looked like they hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Industrial fluorescent lights illuminated the scarred metal interior, and hydraulic machinery hummed somewhere below in the basement. What none of them knew was that this would be the last time anyone would see Patricia Kellerman alive. As she stepped into car B and pressed the button for the 3rd floor, Kellerman had no reason to suspect that this routine safety inspection would become Hartford County's most baffling disappearance case. The elevator doors closed with their familiar metallic clang, and the car began its slow ascent into the February night. Within 30 minutes, Patricia Kellerman would vanish without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that would challenge investigators, corporate attorneys, and federal safety regulators for months to come. The Millfield Manufacturing elevator system was a labyrinth of steel cables, hydraulic pistons, and century-old engineering that connected 6 floors of industrial production. Security cameras positioned at each floor landing had been installed in 2018 as part of an insurance requirement, creating an electronic record of every person who entered or exited the elevator cars. At exactly 11:47 p.m. on February 9th, Camera 2B captured Patricia Kellerman stepping into elevator car B on the 2nd floor. She carried her briefcase in her left hand and held her tablet with her right, apparently reviewing notes from her ground floor inspection. The timestamp showed 11:47:22 as the heavy metal doors slid shut behind her. The factory's central dispatch system tracked all elevator movements from a control booth on the 4th floor. Night dispatcher Carol Martinez monitored 4 screens showing the real-time location of each elevator car. According to the automated logs Martinez provided to investigators, Car B ascended normally from the 2nd floor, stopping at the 3rd floor metallurgy department at 11:48:15. The system showed Car B doors opening at level 3. Martinez later told sheriff's investigators. That was normal. She'd requested access to the metallurgy floor to inspect the heavy equipment loading area. The car stayed there for about 3.5 minutes, which seemed reasonable for someone taking photographs and measurements. Radio communication between floors confirmed Kellerman's presence in the metallurgy department. 3rd floor supervisor Danny Ostrowski reported seeing her examining the freight loading dock and testing the emergency brake systems on the industrial scales. Ostrowski described Kellerman as professional but focused, noting that she spent considerable time photographing what appeared to be stress fractures in the concrete floor around the elevator shaft. She asked about weight limits for the elevator, Ostrowski told investigators. Wanted to know if we'd ever exceeded the posted capacity. I told her honestly. Sometimes during peak production we'd load more than we should. She made notes about that, seemed concerned about the floor integrity around the shaft opening. The automated dispatch log showed Car B beginning its ascent from the 3rd floor at 11:51:48. The elevator's destination, according to the electronic records, was the 4th floor quality control department. Travel time between floors 3 and 4 typically took 90 seconds, including door operations. But at 11:52:37, something went wrong. The central dispatch system registered Car B as position unknown, a fault code that typically indicated sensor malfunction or power interruption. Carol Martinez immediately attempted radio contact with anyone in the elevator, following standard protocol for system anomalies. Car B, this is dispatch, please respond, Martinez called over the intercom system. No response came from the elevator car. She tried again at 1-minute intervals for the next 10 minutes, each call echoing through the factory speaker system without reply. Maintenance records obtained by investigators revealed a troubling pattern in the weeks leading up to Kellerman's disappearance. The hydraulic system powering all 4 elevator cars had experienced irregular pressure readings since January 15. Chief Maintenance Supervisor Bill Hendricks had documented at least 12 separate incidents of pressure variance beyond acceptable parameters. The hydraulic system operated from a central pump room in the factory basement. Massive pistons raised and lowered each elevator car using pressurized fluid circulated through steel pipes installed in 1952. The system had been retrofitted 3 times, in 1973, 1989, and 2003, but the basic infrastructure remained unchanged since the Truman administration. Those old hydraulic systems weren't designed for modern safety standards, Elevator Inspector Thomas Riley later explained to investigators. Riley had conducted the factory's last official safety inspection in March 2018. The pressure sensors were analog equipment from the 1970s. If someone wanted to manipulate the system, those old sensors wouldn't necessarily detect unauthorized adjustments. At 11:58 p.m., Carol Martinez activated the emergency protocol for elevator system failures. She contacted building security, night supervisor Frank Kowalski, and the factory's 24-hour maintenance service. The response team gathered at the 4th floor landing, where Car B should have arrived 6 minutes earlier. The indicator panel showed Car B suspended between the 3rd and 4th floors, approximately 22 feet above the 3rd floor landing and 18 feet below the 4th floor opening. This position was mechanically stable but highly unusual. The elevator's programming should have prevented it from stopping between floors under normal circumstances. The car was just hanging there, security guard Mike Torres later told investigators. All the lights were on inside. We could see that through the shaft inspection window, but nobody was answering when we called down to them. Torres used his master key to access the shaft inspection panel between floors. Through the narrow window, he could see into Car B's interior. The industrial fluorescent lights illuminated what appeared to be an empty elevator car, but Patricia Kellerman was nowhere to be seen. Her briefcase sat on the car floor near the control panel. Her tablet lay beside it, screen still glowing with what appeared to be measurement data from her 3rd floor inspection. But the investigator herself had vanished completely. At 12:03 a.m. on February 10th, Frank Kowalski made the call that would launch one of Hartford County's most perplexing investigations. As emergency responders raced toward Millfield Manufacturing through the cold February night, one question dominated everyone's thoughts. How does someone disappear from a sealed elevator car suspended between floors? Hartford County Sheriff's Deputy Marcus Webb arrived at Millfield Manufacturing at 12:17 a.m., followed minutes later by the Millfield Volunteer Fire Department's emergency response team. The factory's night shift had been evacuated from the affected area, leaving only essential personnel to assist with what everyone assumed would be a routine elevator rescue operation. Fire Chief Raymond Kowalski, Frank's younger brother, had dealt with elevator emergencies before. The factory's aging system required intervention roughly twice per year, usually involving workers trapped between floors due to hydraulic failures. But as the emergency crew prepared their equipment, they quickly realized this situation was unlike anything they'd encountered. Standard procedure is to lower the car to the nearest floor and extract the passenger, Chief Kowalski later explained in his official report. We have hydraulic jacks and manual override systems specifically for these situations. The car was stable, the emergency lighting was functioning, and we had clear visual access through the inspection window. The firefighters positioned their emergency equipment on the 3rd floor, directly below the suspended elevator car. Using portable hydraulic jacks, they began the process of manually lowering Car B to the 3rd floor landing. The operation took 18 minutes, complicated by the car's substantial weight and the need to maintain precise control during descent. At 12:41 a.m., Car B came to rest at the 3rd floor landing with a mechanical groan that echoed through the factory's brick corridors. Frank Kowalski used his supervisor's master key to unlock the elevator doors, while Deputy Webb and Fire Chief Kowalski prepared to assist Patricia Kellerman. The doors slid open to reveal an empty elevator car. Kellerman's brown leather briefcase sat precisely where security guard Mike Torres had observed it through the inspection window, near the elevator's control panel, apparently undisturbed. Her tablet computer lay beside it, screen still displaying a spreadsheet of safety measurements she had recorded on the third floor. The device showed a battery charge of 67% and no indication of damage or interference. Deputy Webb immediately secured the scene, preventing anyone from entering the elevator car until additional investigators could arrive. Using his flashlight, he conducted a preliminary visual examination of Car B's interior. The elevator measured 12 feet by 8 feet with no hidden compartments, storage areas, or secondary exits. Steel mesh gates enclosed the car on 3 sides, with the 4th side open into each floor. Most puzzling was the elevator car's physical integrity. Webb's inspection revealed no damage to the mesh gates, no sign of forced entry or exit, and no indication that anyone had attempted to climb through the car's ceiling access panel. The access panel remained securely fastened with its original bolts, and dust patterns around the edges suggested it hadn't been disturbed in months. It was like she had just evaporated, Webb later told investigators. Her belongings were there, arranged naturally like someone had set them down, but the person was gone. There was no way in or out of that car except through the doors, and those doors had been closed when the car stopped between floors. At 1:15 a.m., Sheriff's Detective Lieutenant Michael Kowalski arrived with the county's crime scene processing unit. While Webb maintained scene security, Detective Kowalski began documenting the elevator car's contents and condition. His photographs would later become crucial evidence in the investigation. Kellerman's briefcase contained exactly what investigators expected: safety inspection forms, measuring devices, a digital camera with 127 photographs of factory equipment, and preliminary violation notices for 3 separate safety code infractions. The briefcase showed no signs of struggle or hasty packing. Documents remained organized in labeled folders, and her handwritten notes appeared complete through her 3rd floor inspection. The tablet computer proved more revealing. Kellerman's final data entry was time-stamped at 11:51:22, just 26 seconds before Car B began its ascent from the 3rd floor. Her notes indicated concerns about systematic bypassing of safety interlocks and evidence of unauthorized modifications to hydraulic pressure systems. She had photographed specific equipment serial numbers and measured stress fractures that she described as consistent with systematic overloading beyond design parameters. Building engineer Sarah Walsh arrived at 1:30 a.m. to assist with the elevator shaft inspection. Walsh had maintained industrial elevator systems for 12 years and knew Millfield's equipment intimately. Her examination of the shaft between floors 3 and 4 revealed no access points, service ladders, or maintenance openings that could explain Kellerman's disappearance. The shaft is completely enclosed between those floors, Walsh told investigators. There's a utility conduit for electrical systems, but it's only 6 inches in diameter. The ventilation system has grills, but they're secured with bolts that would take tools to remove, and none showed signs of tampering. Perhaps most confounding was the elevator car's position when it stopped. According to the hydraulic system logs, Car B had halted precisely 22.7 feet above the 3rd floor landing, not at a mechanical safety stop, not due to obstruction, but at what appeared to be a predetermined position between floors. Elevators don't just stop in random locations, Walsh explained. The control system is designed to complete floor-to-floor travel or return to the nearest landing in case of malfunction. For the car to stop exactly where it did would require either catastrophic system failure or deliberate override of safety protocols. As dawn broke over the Connecticut River Valley on February 10th, investigators faced an impossible puzzle. Patricia Kellerman had entered a sealed elevator car, traveled normally between floors, and then vanished completely while suspended between floors 3 and 4. Her belongings remained undisturbed. The elevator showed no signs of tampering, and the building's security system recorded no unauthorized access. Somewhere in the maze of industrial machinery and century-old brick corridors, a corporate insurance investigator had disappeared without a trace. By 8:30 a.m. on February 10th, news of Patricia Kellerman's disappearance had reached the Hartford headquarters of Unified Risk Management. The insurance company's crisis response team was activated within hours, led by corporate attorney Diana Chen and accompanied by 2 private investigators specializing in industrial incidents. Chen arrived at Millfield Manufacturing in a black Lincoln Navigator, followed by a forensic accountant and a team of insurance adjusters. For Unified Risk Management, Kellerman's disappearance represented more than just a missing employee. It was a potential liability nightmare involving worker safety, corporate negligence, and millions of dollars in exposure. Patricia was investigating specific safety violations that could have resulted in significant penalties and premium increases. Chen later explained to Hartford County investigators. Her preliminary findings suggested systematic violations that had been ongoing for months, possibly years. The financial implications for both Millfield Manufacturing and our company were substantial. Unified Risk Management's internal records revealed a troubling pattern at Millfield Manufacturing. Workers' compensation claims had increased 340% over the previous 18 months, with the majority involving injuries related to the factory's elevator system. Between July 2017 and February 2019, the company had processed 23 separate injury claims involving elevator-related incidents. The claims ranged from minor injuries caused by sudden stops or mechanical jolts to more serious accidents involving crushing injuries from improperly functioning doors. Most concerning was a pattern Chen's team identified. Workers had reported multiple incidents that weren't formally documented by factory management, suggesting a systematic effort to minimize the apparent scope of safety problems. Forensic accountant Robert Martinez analyzed Millfield Manufacturing's insurance premiums and discovered that the company faced potential rate increases of up to 400% if Kellerman's safety audit had been completed. Her preliminary findings, recovered from her tablet computer, documented violations that could have triggered immediate suspension of the factory's workers' compensation coverage. The financial pressure on Millfield was enormous, Martinez told investigators. They were looking at premium increases that could have cost them between $800,000 and $1.20 million annually. For a manufacturing operation their size, that kind of increase could have forced them out of business. Factory management, led by General Manager Anthony Russo, denied any knowledge of the specific safety violations Kellerman was investigating. Russo, a 15-year veteran of industrial management, insisted that his company maintained comprehensive safety protocols and had never deliberately concealed workplace injuries. "We cooperated fully with all insurance inspections," Russo stated in a formal interview with Chen's team. "If there were safety issues we weren't aware of, we would have addressed them immediately. The suggestion that we would somehow harm an investigator to avoid compliance costs is both offensive and completely false." But Chen's investigation uncovered evidence that contradicted Russo's claims. Corporate security footage from the weeks preceding Kellerman's disappearance showed an unidentified individual accessing the factory's electrical systems after normal business hours. The person appeared on camera 3 separate times between January 20th and February 5th, always during night shifts when minimal security coverage was in place. The individual wore maintenance coveralls and a hard hat, suggesting authorized access to restricted areas. However, when Chen's team cross-referenced the footage with employee records and contractor schedules, they found no legitimate work orders that matched the times and locations of the mysterious access. Someone was making unauthorized modifications to building systems, Chen later testified to state insurance regulators. The footage showed this person working specifically on electrical panels that controlled the elevator system's safety interlocks. These weren't random break-ins. This was someone with knowledge of the building's infrastructure making deliberate changes to safety systems. The corporate investigation also revealed financial relationships that raised additional questions. Millfield Manufacturing's primary elevator maintenance contractor, Precision Lift Services, had received payment increases totaling 85% over the previous year despite providing what appeared to be reduced service levels. Precision Lift Services was owned by Thomas Kowalski, Frank Kowalski's cousin, and a longtime associate of General Manager Russo. The company had been Millfield's exclusive elevator maintenance contractor for 8 years, despite complaints from workers about response times and repair quality. Payment records obtained by Chen's team showed that Precision Lift Services had received $127,000 in maintenance fees during 2018, compared to $68,000 in 2017. However, maintenance logs indicated fewer actual service calls and shorter repair times, suggesting that the increased payments weren't correlated with increased service. Most intriguing was a series of work orders dated between December 2018 and February 2019 that authorized safety system upgrades and hydraulic pressure modifications. The work orders were signed by Frank Kowalski and approved by Russo, but neither man could provide detailed explanations of what work had actually been performed. The documentation was deliberately vague, Chen told investigators. Terms like system optimization and pressure adjustments could mean anything. When we asked for specific technical specifications or before and after measurements, nobody could provide them. Perhaps most damaging was Chen's discovery that Millfield Manufacturing had been negotiating a potential sale to a Connecticut-based investment group. The proposed purchase price was $12.80 million, contingent on the factory maintaining its current insurance coverage and avoiding any major safety violations or regulatory sanctions. Kellerman's safety audit, if completed, could have derailed the sale by triggering insurance coverage suspension or mandatory safety improvements costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. The investment group had specifically identified ongoing insurance compliances as a critical factor in their purchase decision. The timing was suspicious, Chen later explained to federal investigators. Patricia's unscheduled audit occurred exactly 3 weeks before the final purchase agreement was to be signed. If her findings had become public, or if our company had suspended coverage based on her recommendations, the sale would have collapsed. As Chen's team compiled their findings, a complex web of financial relationships, safety violations, and potential motives began to emerge. The factory faced crushing insurance premium increases, key personnel had family connections to the maintenance contractor receiving suspicious payments, and a lucrative sale hung in the balance. But the fundamental question remained unanswered. What had happened to Patricia Kellerman during those 5 minutes between floors 3 and 4 of elevator car B? 3 days after Patricia Kellerman's disappearance, Unified Risk Management brought in an independent elevator inspector from Boston. Thomas Riley had 30 years of experience with industrial lift systems, and his reputation for thorough analysis had made him a sought-after expert witness in liability cases throughout New England. Riley's examination of elevator car B began at 6 a.m. on February 13th. The factory floor was eerily quiet, with only the hum of emergency lighting and the distant sound of police radios echoing through the cavernous space. As Riley descended into the elevator shaft with his testing equipment, he immediately noticed something troubling. The hydraulic pressure sensors on the third-floor mechanism had been tampered with. Riley found evidence of recent tool marks on the sensor housings, and the calibration settings had been altered from their factory specifications. According to his preliminary report, filed with Hartford County authorities on February 15th, someone had deliberately modified the system to bypass standard safety protocols. These changes weren't random, Riley would later explain to investigators. Someone with knowledge of industrial elevator systems had systematically disabled multiple safety features: the pressure sensors, the emergency brake system, even the communication array had been compromised. But Riley's most disturbing discovery came when he examined the maintenance records. Precision Lift Services had received work orders for modifications to the Millfield Manufacturing system that no one at the factory could account for. The work orders, dated just 2 weeks before Kellerman's audit, authorized emergency safety system updates and hydraulic pressure recalibration. James Morrison, the lead technician who had performed the work, claimed he had received the orders through normal channels. But when investigators traced the authorization codes, they led to a dead end. The person who had signed off on the modifications didn't exist in any corporate directory, and the email account used to submit the work orders had been created just days before the modifications were completed. Meanwhile, the insurance records painted an even more troubling picture. Millfield Manufacturing's workers' compensation premiums had increased by over 340% in the past 18 months. The primary driver of this increase was a series of elevator-related injuries, ranging from minor mechanical failures to 2 serious accidents that had resulted in extended medical leaves. The most recent incident had occurred just 6 weeks before Kellerman's visit. A factory worker named Maria Santos had been trapped between floors for over 4 hours when elevator car A had malfunctioned during a routine shift change. Santos had suffered severe anxiety and claustrophobia as a result of the incident, and her attorney had filed a substantial liability claim against both the factory and the elevator maintenance company. When investigators finally gained full access to Kellerman's preliminary audit notes, recovered from her tablet's memory, they found references to what she had termed systematic safety system bypasses. Her initial observations suggested that multiple safety protocols throughout the factory had been deliberately circumvented, not through negligence, but through calculated modifications designed to reduce operational costs while maintaining the appearance of compliance. One particularly troubling note, time-stamped at 11:43 p.m. on the night of her disappearance, read, "Elevator system modifications appear designed to eliminate automatic safety shutdowns during peak production periods. Risk assessment indicates potential for catastrophic failure under normal operational loads." The implications were staggering. If Kellerman's assessment was correct, the factory had been operating with compromised safety systems for months, potentially endangering every worker on every shift. The liability exposure alone could have bankrupted the company, not to mention the criminal charges that might follow if regulatory agencies determined that safety violations had been intentionally concealed. Precision Lift Services found itself under intense scrutiny. Company owner Robert Vance initially denied any knowledge of unauthorized modifications, but phone records subpoenaed by investigators revealed a series of communications between Vance and unknown parties in the weeks leading up to Kellerman's audit. The timing of these communications was particularly suspicious. On January 28th, 2 days before Kellerman's unscheduled visit, Vance had received a call from a number that investigators later traced to a prepaid cell phone purchased with cash at a convenience store in West Hartford. The call lasted 14 minutes, and within hours of its completion, Vance had dispatched his team to perform the emergency updates that had compromised the elevator's safety systems. As spring arrived in Millfield, federal OSHA investigators conducted their own assessment of the factory's safety protocols. Their preliminary findings, released in a heavily redacted report, confirmed Kellerman's observations. The elevator system had been systematically modified to bypass critical safety features, and the modifications appeared to be part of a broader pattern of cost-cutting measures that had placed workers at serious risk. But the most chilling discovery came from Riley's final technical analysis. The modifications to elevator car B weren't random cost-saving measures. They had been specifically designed to create a scenario where the car could be stopped between floors, with its safety systems disabled and its communication array compromised. Someone had turned the elevator into a trap. The hydraulic modifications allowed for precise positioning control, Riley explained in his final report. The communication system bypasses prevented emergency calls from the car. The safety sensor alterations disabled automatic emergency protocols. These weren't maintenance shortcuts. This was deliberate sabotage designed to create a specific operational scenario. The technical evidence painted a disturbing picture of premeditation and planning, but it also raised the most haunting question of all. Was Patricia Kellerman simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, or had she been the intended target all along? As investigators pieced together the mechanical evidence, one thing became clear. Kellerman's disappearance wasn't an accident. Someone had carefully prepared elevator car B for exactly what had happened on the night of February 9th. The question was whether that someone had been trying to conceal evidence of safety violations or eliminate the investigator who had discovered them. By mid-March, as investigators from multiple agencies compiled their findings, 3 distinct theories emerged to explain Patricia Kellerman's disappearance from the Millfield Manufacturing elevator. Each theory was supported by compelling evidence, yet each left crucial questions unanswered. The Hartford County Sheriff's Department, led by Detective Lieutenant Michael Kowalski, favored what they termed the industrial accident and cover-up theory. According to their investigation, Kellerman had discovered evidence of the safety system tampering and confronted someone about it on the night of her disappearance. The confrontation had escalated, resulting in either an accidental death or an assault that had gone too far. The timeline supports this scenario, Detective Kowalski explained in a press conference on March 15th. Kellerman's final tablet entries show increasing concern about what she was finding. Her last communication, sent at 11:51 p.m., was a text message to her supervisor stating that she had found evidence of systematic safety fraud and would be filing an emergency report the next morning. According to the sheriff's theory, panicked factory management or maintenance personnel had then attempted to conceal the evidence by removing Kellerman's body from the building. The elevator's compromised safety systems had provided the perfect cover, creating a scenario that appeared impossible to explain through conventional means. The theory gained credibility when investigators discovered that the factory's loading dock security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned between midnight and 3 a.m. on the night of Kellerman's disappearance. The timing seemed too convenient to be coincidental, particularly given that the cameras had been functioning normally for months prior to that evening. But Unified Risk Management's crisis team, led by attorney Diana Chen, presented a very different interpretation of the evidence. Their investigation, conducted by a team of private investigators and forensic specialists, suggested a premeditated conspiracy to eliminate Kellerman before she could complete her audit. Patricia Kellerman wasn't a random victim, Chen argued in a detailed report submitted to state prosecutors. She was specifically targeted because of her expertise and her reputation for thorough investigations. Someone knew she was coming, and someone prepared for her arrival. The insurance company's theory was supported by several troubling discoveries. Phone records showed that Kellerman's audit schedule had been discussed in multiple conversations between factory management and unknown parties in the days before her visit. Additionally, investigators found evidence that someone had accessed Kellerman's company email account from an external IP address just hours before she had departed for Millfield. Most damning was the discovery that Kellerman's hotel reservation in Hartford had been canceled and rebooked multiple times in the week before her visit, suggesting that someone had been tracking her movements and potentially attempting to manipulate her schedule. The third major theory came from an unexpected source, the United Auto Workers local that represented many of Millfield Manufacturing's employees. Union representative Sarah Martinez presented evidence suggesting that Kellerman's disappearance was connected to a broader pattern of corporate malfeasance designed to suppress worker safety complaints. Patricia Kellerman was getting too close to the truth, Martinez stated in a formal complaint filed with the Connecticut Department of Labor. Our members had been reporting safety violations for months, and management had been systematically ignoring their concerns. When an outside investigator finally showed up to document what we'd been saying all along, someone decided she had to be stopped. The union's theory gained support from interviews with factory workers who described a climate of fear and intimidation surrounding safety issues. Multiple employees reported being threatened with termination if they filed formal safety complaints, and several claimed that maintenance requests related to the elevator system had been deliberately ignored or delayed. Particularly compelling was testimony from Maria Santos, the worker who had been trapped in an elevator car 6 weeks before Kellerman's disappearance. Santos revealed that she had been pressured to downplay the severity of her experience and had been offered a substantial financial settlement in exchange for dropping her workers' compensation claim. They didn't want anyone looking too closely at those elevators, Santos told investigators. When I heard about the insurance lady disappearing, I knew it wasn't an accident. Federal OSHA investigators, meanwhile, focused on the technical aspects of the safety system tampering. Their analysis suggested that the modifications to the elevator system represented months of planning and coordination. The work had been performed by multiple parties, using sophisticated knowledge of industrial safety protocols and regulatory requirements. OSHA's preliminary findings revealed that the Millfield Manufacturing elevator system had been red-tagged twice in the past year for safety violations. Both times, the factory had appealed the citations and had been granted extensions to address the problems. The extensions had been obtained through a complex legal process that had delayed meaningful safety improvements for over 8 months. Dr. Rebecca Walsh, OSHA's chief industrial safety engineer for the region, noted that the pattern of violations and appeals suggested a deliberate strategy to avoid compliance while maintaining operational capacity. What we see at Millfield is unfortunately not uncommon, Walsh explained in her report. Facilities that are facing financial pressure sometimes attempt to maintain production levels by deferring safety improvements. What makes this case unusual is the sophistication of the concealment efforts. But even as investigators pursued these various theories, new evidence continued to emerge that complicated the picture. Security footage from a traffic camera 2 miles from the factory showed a vehicle matching the description of Kellerman's rental car, leaving the area at 2:17 a.m., more than 2 hours after her disappearance was first reported. The footage was too grainy to identify the driver, but the timing raised disturbing questions. If Kellerman had vanished from the elevator at 11:52 p.m., who had been driving her car in the early morning hours? And where had they been going? As spring arrived in Millfield, each investigating agency remained convinced that their theory explained Patricia Kellerman's fate. The sheriff's department believed in an accident followed by a panicked cover-up. The insurance company suspected premeditated murder. The union saw corporate intimidation taken to its logical extreme. Federal regulators focused on systematic safety. Fraud died. But none of them could account for all the evidence, and none of them could answer the most fundamental question of all. What had actually happened in those 5 minutes between the 3rd and 4th floors? 6 weeks after Patricia Kellerman's disappearance, Millfield Manufacturing announced that it would be closing its Connecticut operations permanently. The decision, company officials claimed, was based on changing market conditions and operational challenges. But industry observers noted that the timing coincided suspiciously with the ongoing investigations into safety violations and potential criminal liability. The closure affected 247 workers, many of whom had spent decades in the facility. For the residents of Millfield, it represented the end of an era and the loss of the town's largest employer. But for investigators, it created a new set of obstacles. With the factory shuttered and equipment being sold off or relocated, crucial evidence was potentially being destroyed or dispersed beyond recovery. Detective Lieutenant Kowalski fought to preserve the crime scene, but corporate attorneys argued that the factory closure was unrelated to the ongoing investigation and that the company had a right to liquidate its assets. By the end of April, Elevator Car B had been dismantled and sold to a scrap metal dealer in New Haven, taking with it any remaining physical evidence of the modifications that might have played a role in Kellerman's disappearance. The legal aftermath proved equally complex. Unified Risk Management reached undisclosed settlements with the families of workers who had been injured in elevator-related incidents over the past 2 years. The settlement agreements included strict non-disclosure clauses, effectively silencing potential witnesses who might have provided crucial testimony about the factory's safety culture. Maria Santos, the worker who had been trapped in elevator car A, received what sources described as a substantial financial settlement. When approached by investigators after signing her agreement, Santos declined to discuss her experiences at the factory, citing legal constraints. Her attorney confirmed that she was bound by confidentiality provisions that prohibited her from discussing safety issues at Millfield Manufacturing. Precision Lift Services, the elevator maintenance contractor, faced its own legal challenges. In May, the Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection revoked the company's operating license following a review of its maintenance practices. The revocation was based on findings that the company had performed unauthorized modifications to safety systems at multiple facilities throughout the state, not just at Millfield Manufacturing. Company owner Robert Vance denied any wrongdoing but announced that he would not contest the license revocation. Precision Lift Services ceased operations in June, leaving investigators with limited access to personnel and records that might have shed light on the elevator modifications. Vance himself became increasingly difficult to locate as the summer progressed. His attorney reported that Vance had left Connecticut for personal health reasons, but attempts to contact him for follow-up interviews were unsuccessful. By August, his Hartford area residence was listed for sale, and neighbors reported that the property appeared to have been abandoned. Meanwhile, the most intriguing evidence in the case remained locked away in digital format. Kellerman's tablet had contained encrypted files that her employer claimed contained proprietary investigative methodologies and client information. Despite months of efforts by both law enforcement and private cybersecurity firms, the encryption had not been broken. The encrypted files were particularly frustrating because Kellerman's unencrypted notes suggested that she had discovered something significant in her final hours at the factory. Her last recorded observation, time-stamped at 11:49 p.m., read, "Pattern consistent with coordinated effort to conceal safety violations. Recommend immediate federal intervention and criminal investigation." What specific evidence had led Kellerman to that conclusion remained unknown. Her preliminary audit notes referenced systematic documentation of safety bypasses and evidence of regulatory compliance fraud, but the detailed supporting materials appeared to be contained in the encrypted files that investigators could not access. Unified Risk Management claimed that releasing the encryption keys would compromise ongoing investigations at other client facilities and violate attorney-client privilege. The legal battle over access to the files continued through the fall, with no resolution in sight. As 2020 began, the case officially remained open, but active investigation had been substantially reduced. The Hartford County Sheriff's Department continued to classify Patricia Kellerman's disappearance as a missing persons case, though Detective Lieutenant Kowalski privately acknowledged that the likelihood of finding new leads was diminishing with each passing month. The federal OSHA investigation concluded in January 2020 with a finding that Millfield Manufacturing had violated numerous safety regulations, but the agency's report was heavily redacted and did not address questions surrounding Kellerman's disappearance. OSHA imposed substantial fines against the company, but with the factory closed and the corporate entity in bankruptcy proceedings, collection of the penalties seemed unlikely. Perhaps most troubling was the realization that the case had exposed potential vulnerabilities in the industrial safety oversight system throughout Connecticut and possibly beyond. If the theories about coordinated safety fraud were correct, Millfield Manufacturing might not have been an isolated incident. State labor officials quietly launched reviews of elevator maintenance practices at other facilities serviced by Precision Lift Services, and preliminary findings suggested that unauthorized modifications might have been performed at multiple locations. The scope of potential safety violations and the number of workers who might have been placed at risk remained under investigation. For the residents of Millfield, the unanswered questions surrounding Patricia Kellerman's disappearance became part of the town's ongoing struggle to rebuild after the factory closure. The case had cast a shadow over the community's industrial heritage and raised uncomfortable questions about the relationship between economic pressure and worker safety. Today, more than 4 years later, Patricia Kellerman remains missing. Her rental car was never found. The encrypted files on her tablet have never been decoded. The identity of the person who drove away from the factory in the early morning hours of February 10th remains unknown. Somewhere in Connecticut, someone knows what happened in those 5 minutes between the 3rd and 4th floors. Until that person speaks, Patricia Kellerman's fate will remain one of the state's most perplexing mysteries. The elevator that carried her into the darkness has been reduced to scrap metal. The factory where she vanished stands empty. But the questions she was trying to answer about safety, about corporate responsibility, about the price of cutting corners, echo still through the halls of industrial America. If this case stays with you, you're not alone. Here at Unresolved America, we cover cases like this every single day. Stories that deserve to be remembered, questions that refuse to fade. If you want to keep these investigations alive, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Drop a like if this story moved you, and leave a comment telling us which detail haunts you most. Until tomorrow, stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop asking questions.